Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so in your mind, you know, and I always marvel about this because basically my experience and the experience of the listener is to go on this like, well, what's the next photo going to be? You know, like we don't know what it could be. It could be a pirate or whatever. But here it's a monarch butterfly on a potentially not a rose bush, maybe a rhododendron. Half of the flowers are kind of dead and dying, but half are bright. The monarch is a nice shot, probably done with your phone. In terms of it's on the background that's out of focus is like a deck. The more than a third or about half of the image is just this close-up shot of the black and white sort of white polka dot black body, and then the bright orange wings of the monarch. And so now I have to ask, why, Angela? Why?
Well, I rescue monarch butterflies when they are in the larvae state. As you probably are aware, they are endangered. And so what I do is I have a lot of gardens so that I encourage natural habitat all over our property. But there are times when, and they only eat, the larvae only eat milkweed. And a lot of farmers, they pull the milkweed out of their fields. So the food source is really not there. So I really encourage it on our property. But they spread through runners once these milkweed plants are established. And so they will go outside the boundaries of my garden into the lawn. And so what happens is when my husband is ready to mow the lawn, I say, wait, hold on. And I go through all of the grass. And if I see any shoots that are coming up, I examine those leaves, because most of the time the female monarchs will lay their eggs on the most tender of shoots. And invariably I will find eggs under the leaves of these milkweed plants.
Wow.
So then what I do is I have a license with, you can't raise them without having a license. So I'm a member of the Toronto Entomologists Association, T. And so under that license, we are allowed to raise monarchs. I have a very natural setting where I have a sort of an outdoor mesh where I keep living milkweed plants. And so once I have taken a cutting because it was in the lawn, then I put them into little, they're sort of like florist tubes, and I put them into the pot with the larger plants, and I just let the larvae grow. And they go through 5 stages, what they call instar stages, until they're ready to go into chrysalis. And from chrysalis, then eventually they eclose as a monarch butterfly. But I do everything outside. I don't coddle. I keep them in the same environment that they would be. I just save them from the lawnmower blades. So it's a passion of mine to save these little things, because it's certainly not their mama's fault that they got, that their eggs were placed on, on something destined for mowing.
Well, okay. So I had no idea this is where you're going to take us. Monarchs. What? Okay. Now, I immediately have to ask, like, it's against the law to raise monarchs? Like, it's a regulated thing?
Yes, it's regulated because, unfortunately, there are a lot of people who mean well. They think that they're saving them because they know that they're endangered. And what happens is they end up raising them in mass quantities. And really, it's survival of the fittest. So, for example, in nature, of 100 eggs that are laid, only 1 or 2 will actually become butterflies, because they have natural predators and other things that happen in the environment when man is not involved, obviously. So some people are the philosophy, let's save all of them because they're endangered. But what happens is if you collect 100 eggs and you raise them in crowded, probably not the cleanest of conditions, you're not necessarily raising healthy monarchs. You may be raising monarchs with diseases. And so the reason why they regulate,
Mm.
in fact, they regulate all wildlife really in Ontario, most provinces, really all provinces. People cannot raise animals in captivity. And the monarchs fall under the Ministry of Natural Resources rules
Hmm.
as well, as including swallowtail, like swallowtail tiger swallowtail butterflies as well. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's regulated for their protection.
Angela, like, I am blown away because, okay, so one of the things about being Canadian, I think that really stands out, and not to say that other countries aren't like this at all, but I live in Hong Kong, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm a bit of a weirdo too, I guess. I'm a bit of a nerd. So consider how, have you ever been to Hong Kong?
No, I haven't, but we have a dear friend who goes all the time.
Right. I think Canada, in terms of Canada's size, is about, I don't know how, like, I don't know how many thousands of times bigger than Hong Kong. Hong Kong is basically the size of Greater Toronto area, right? Like,
Yes.
I think Toronto, all the proper, all of, with all the suburbs and everything, is bigger than Hong Kong. Hong
Yes.
Kong has 7.5 million people.
Mhm.
Okay. In all of Canada, there are about 300 species of butterfly. I remember looking this up one time. And in Hong Kong, which is so tiny, it has more species of butterfly that come in, live, are regularly here than in the whole of Canada.
Wow.
So
How cool is that?
it's fellow nerd.
Oh,
Yeah, it's amazing. It's
fantastic.
amazing.
Wow, that's amazing.
So what drew you? Okay, so when did you first learn about well, obviously monarchs really stand out. Like, it's kind of like absolutely incredible. They're such a signature visible species. So when did you first get interested? And have you ever been down to Mexico to witness their congregations?
Oh, I wish I have been to Mexico, but not to see them in their overwintering areas. But it is pretty phenomenal if you ever look at the photographs. I
Mm,
mean, there's just clusters of them everywhere. And
yeah.
you see something similar when they're getting ready to migrate. They do congregate at Peely Point in Western Ontario, and it's
Okay.
just fascinating, just fascinating. I guess everybody is fascinated by these beautiful creatures because of the distance that they travel. And they travel it all in one go,
Hmm.
pretty much. And some of them do travel back, but most of them, when they come back after overwintering, it's more multi generational. So the ones that
Right.
overwintered in Mexico don't necessarily make the entire trip back. Some might, but most of it's multi generational. So they sort of travel in waves, and as they're ready. So it's very important that you don't see any natural disasters like you heard a number of years ago in Texas. There were some terrible. I think there was some really cold weather that happened, and plants died off that were key nectar sources for the monarchs. And this could happen as they start migrating. There's two migrating points that they end up going to: South California area as well as Mexico. So the ones from Western
Mm,
Canada tend to go obviously to California. The ones from Ontario, Eastern Canada basically go to Mexico. And so it's just interesting, but they do multi generational on the way back. So I find that very interesting. They're just amazing creatures, which is the other reason why when people are raising monarchs, they want that 1 or 2% to be the strongest because they've really survived everything. And they want those to be the best of the best because they've got a long journey to go to. And that's the other reason why
right.
it's best not to interfere. The only time I do is when I'm rescuing them from certain death. Otherwise, there's nothing more joyous. I'm working in my garden, and
Right.
what I do with my vegetable garden is I don't have just straight vegetables. I'll have patches of flowers intermittent throughout it. And so what that basically does is I'm attracting pollinators this way to the flowers as well as to my vegetable plants. And so I might be picking some tomatoes and then I look over and I see the milkweed plant and there is a beautiful monarch caterpillar enjoying lunch. So that's very joyous to me. I find that fascinating, really interesting. So I try to keep the habitat really natural for them.
I never know what's going to happen in our conversations, like in these podcast conversations. I'm just like, okay, caterpillars, monarchs. This is great, Angela. You want to move on to the next image, or do you want? Yeah.
No, it's fine. I tried to pick some eclectic type of pictures that were representatives of my personality, and I thought you might enjoy that.
No, this is great. This is great. Well, let's move on to the next photo. So, is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So, if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it